Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Homeschool for the Soul. My name is Kevin here at Real Life, and we're excited to be able to talk today with Eric Weaver, who is a psychologist here in the area. And we're going to be talking about conflict. As you know, we've been discussing conflict here on the podcast, and we have a lot of different ways that we engage with conflict in our homes, with our families, and with our friends on a daily basis, particularly during COVID. And so we're going to talk to Eric today just to see from his perspective why conflict happens in the world and some practical ways that we can deal with it. So Eric, I'm going to ask you, in your opinion, from a psychologist kind of perspective, what causes conflict in the world? What causes conflict in relationships?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a great question. If it's okay, I think I'll maybe talk about it from the perspective of relationships, maybe partnerships or marriages, and we can kind of maybe extrapolate from there. And so one of the ways that I tend to look at conflict oftentimes is that we can get into a competition of needs. And so when two people are kind of locked in a conflict, they tend to want to pull away. And they want to really guard, and they want to defend, and they want to really see things from their perspective. And that really by necessity kind of creates an oppositional dynamic. So we're no longer now creating space between the two of us where we can meet and see and hear each other. We're kind of pulling back into a pattern that can become a conflict pattern. And so relationships oftentimes will have those conflict patterns. Minimizing, dismissing, attacking, maybe even shutting down the conversation, or kind of gaslighting, where maybe the issue at hand is going to be made to be something bigger about something else. I don't like the way you're talking to me, or the way that you're coming at me, and now we're talking about that versus maybe what's needing to be addressed. And so what happens is that we really tend to defend and pull apart. We talk on the surface, and we don't really ever quite get to the deeper level of what's happening. That ends up creating distance, and that ruptures the connection between us relationally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm just thinking, I would imagine that all of us bring things that are under the surface. Would you call that baggage? Would you call that things that we're bringing to the relationship? Is that kind of how you would define that?
Absolutely, yeah. And really, that baggage is our history. It's our household that we were raised in. It's the dynamics of how conflict was engaged or not engaged growing up, and maybe even some of the things that we've experienced in life that have been hard or painful that maybe tend to kind of show up in our relationships and in the ways that we think and feel.
Yeah. Well, if I'm thinking, if I'm in a relationship with a spouse, and as a couple, we're kind of experiencing that, kind of segmenting, we're each in our own corners, God calls us to really come together and work as a team, in a marriage. And so what would you say would be some just practical ways that couples could actually navigate through conflict together and really work together as a team?
So one of the first things that I think is just foundational really is the viewpoint in which you are looking at your partner or your spouse or your friend, for that matter. And that is that this is my teammate, right? We're wearing the same jersey. We're on the same team. And so just like maybe playing basketball, you would never take that ball and check it right into your teammate's face because you guys really want to support each other. You want to move towards the common goal, which is to remain connected, to be able to kind of do life together. It's important to really try and communicate the deeper level of what we're experiencing. And communication exercises are key for that. So really trying to use I statements. So when this was done or said or experienced, I really felt, I really thought, I really experienced it in this way. And that's really avoiding the blaming. That's really avoiding the defenses that can get triggered in whoever we are having this conversation with, because really what we're trying to do is just try and help them see us by using those I statements.
So let me ask you a question, Eric, about this. So let's say
Yeah.
I'm having conflict with my spouse or with a friend, and we're sitting and we're talking about this issue. For me, it seems almost like that's a little centered on me. So if I use an I
Uh-huh.
statement, hey, I feel this way. Do I then invite the other person to also do the same thing? So we're both doing this.
Yeah, and so this is where it gets great, actually, the way that I look at it, because what's really, really helpful in this new different state and way of communicating is to move into a reflective listening dynamic. And that's usually something that I teach my families that I work with, the couples that I work with, or friends that come in. And so reflective listening is really important for creating that space between within the relationship so each party can be present. And so reflective listening really goes like this. So when you share, I feel, I think, I've experienced, the other person needs to be really disciplined to just listen to what's being shared without interrupting, without dismissing, without interpreting, and just repeating back what they're hearing, right? So when you experience this, it felt this way. Did I get that right? Yes, I got that right. Or no, let me clarify. And so this is a process that can feel a little bit like riding a bike. It can feel clunky at first, but when you get into the discipline of it, it really becomes smooth for creating space and connection. And then when it's done, you ask the person, did I get that right? Is there anything else? And when they say, yes, you got it right, no, there's nothing else, then you really look for what is it in what they shared that I can validate authentically. Yeah, I can really see how that made you feel scared when that experience was had with me, or when I said that really hurt you and you felt dismissed. I can see that, right?
Mm.
And then the most important piece is that it's reciprocated. And so then it's the other partner's turn. Okay, so in this situation with this topic, I felt, I thought, I experienced, and then the reflective listening is also then engaged. And then when that is done and it feels like they have been seen and heard, then you validate what it is that you can validate, and then ask, okay, so then what's needed for both of our needs to exist together?
Yeah, that's huge. I would imagine that most of us, when we go through conflict, we just kind of retreat to our own corners and then we don't talk about it, and
Yeah.
maybe it maybe goes away or maybe comes back up later. And this is a great way to really just sit down and have a conversation and say, this is how I feel, and then allow the opportunity to have a dialogue about how they felt, how we felt, and then like you said, validation. I love that. I'm going to actually use that this next weekend in a conversation with a friend.
All right.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Good, good. So one last thing is that it can be really helpful to check in with yourself and say, how am I contributing to this conflict? What is it about this dynamic, or what is it about this issue that I'm contributing to this? Versus we can get so naturally drawn into the defense of the pointing of, well, if they hadn't done this, if they hadn't said this, if they hadn't gone, then it wouldn't make me feel this way. But we also participate in that. And so what is it that we are doing that potentially is contributing to this can also be really helpful.
Absolutely. Do you, let's say, somebody's listening and they're saying, hey, I want to learn more about reflective listening. Is there a good, person to read or a good resource that you would have in that area for somebody to get some more information on reflective listening and how that works in relationships?
Oh, Kevin, you're putting me on the spot with my grad school days. The first person that comes to mind, I believe, is Virginia Satir. And so she is a therapist, and I don't know the name of the book offhand, but I would also say for understanding connection and understanding relationship dynamics and the dance that we oftentimes get into, um, the book Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson is really good. So I would say for communication exercises, Virginia Satir, kind of look her up, and then Sue Johnson, and the book is called Hold Me Tight.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, there you go. There's some resources out
Yeah.
there, and that's great. Well, Eric, I appreciate your insight today. Definitely some things to chew on and to think about in this time where some of us are navigating some conflict in relationships.
Sure. Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, until next time, I'll see you later, Eric.
See you later.